One seemingly regular day, teenage girl Nicole van den Hurk vanished from the face of the earth, was never heard from again. Nicole didn't have an easy life even in her younger days. She was struggling to lead an ordinary teenage life while juggling her studies and job as a bakery worker. Finally, she found some peace and settled to living with her stepbrother at her grandmother's house. But that day wasn't regular at all. Nicole went missing. Investigations into her disappearance lead to the cold, and the case was almost forgotten. 2 decades later, a confession came up in a Facebook post that opened a can of worms. Nicole van den Hurk was born on July 1980 in Erkelenz, a small town in Germany. She was raised there until her infant days with her mother Angelika Tegtmeier and stepfather Ad van den Hurk. When Nicole was born, her biological father was married to someone else. Even on the onset, her life was already complicated. She had a stepbrother, Andy. By the time she was 3, her parents took the two of them and moved to the Netherlands. However, her mother was battling mental issues and often stayed alone in her bedroom for hours. Growing up, her life was still the same. Even from when she was born to when she's growing up and being more aware of their situation, Nicole's family life was somewhat complicated and unstable. She still loved her parents though. But as she grew older, Angelika and Ad were slowly growing apart, and she started noticing it. Eventually, she received the news. Ad and her mother were getting a divorce. By that time, Nicole was just 8 years old, but she understood the weight of the situation nonetheless. Little did they know, it was the last time that they were going to see each other. A series of happenings led to that event. What was once a good relationship was coming to an end. Later on, their fights escalated and multiplied to the point that there were more arguments than kisses between Ad and Angelika. There were even days that they would let pass by without at least talking to each other. Eventually, they went on to get a divorce. Things were not working out between them and their relationship anymore. Before it gets worse in time, they reached a decision. Now that everything was out in the open, they were both nervous for what will become of it. But then, Ad had something else in mind. Ad and Angelika's decision was final. However, before the process was even finished, Ad was already on the move. No one knew about it, not even Nicole. She was surprised as he broke the news to her. Ad asked for full custody of her and to have her live with him until she turns 18. Angelika's mental illness made her unstable enough to keep a home or even take care of a child. It was what compelled Ad to make this move. He was legally Nicole's stepfather, but in spite of that, Ad sees her as his own daughter. They maintained a substantial relationship which developed after many years. Ad appealed to have full custody of Nicole. Though taken by surprise, Nicole was happy to hear about it. Hearing news about her parents' divorce made her worried that she was going to live alone with a woman who can hardly function on her own, much less take care of her daughter. The chaos of the divorce and custody appeal is over. Ad found a new house for all 3 of them and eventually moved in. It was just a new house but is still in the same city where they grew up in. However, Ad is elsewhere for most of the time as he is in the music industry. He was finding it hard to balance his family at home and his work life. Soon after, Ed reached out to his mother to seek help. Her house is just minutes away from their home, and the kids grew to love her. Sometimes she goes to stay at Ad's house, and other times she takes them in her flat. All in all, it was a good decision for them to move in their house, which is just in the same city. Nicole and Andy already had a lot of friends at school, and they were definitely going to miss them had they moved further away. Nevertheless, Ed needed help in the upbringing of the 2 children. His mother, on the other hand, had no problem at all when it comes to watching them after school and on weekends. Though Ad was guilt-ridden for not being there more often, he had no choice but to pursue his career as it is for their sake, too. Everything was going quite well, even with Ad. Just a few months later, he found Jolanda, a woman whom he wanted to marry. They only met through mutual friends and by both being in the music industry. Ad then brought Jolanda home so that Nicole and Andy could meet her. Surprisingly, they all got along well. Before they even knew it, Jolanda had moved in and married their father. Given that she was also in the same industry as their fathers, they traveled for work a lot. Still the same, neither of them was home to look after Nicole and Andy, who were still young and needed a lot of love and attention. As this news was good and well for the family, it was not for others. Soon enough, the news of Ad's remarriage reached Angelika, and it left her heartbroken. It turns out that she was still in love with Ad, and that getting divorced was not her idea at all. Though she was still trying and reaching out for help regarding her mental health issues, things took a wrong turn. The news was too much for Angelika, and as bad as it is, it turned out to be the last nail in her coffin. Just weeks after that, she committed suicide in her own home. It was quite unexpected news for everyone. Even so, the whole family supported Nicole in this dark time. Nicole grew in his father's side and away from her mother, but despite of that, she was still devastated by her mother's death. She never had the chance to become closer with Angelika due to the mental illness that her mother battles with, especially after the divorce and their move to the new house. Ed took extra measures for her care, making sure that she remained surrounded by family while she grieved. Days passed and Nicole grew into a teenager. She got employed at a local bakery and worked her shift daily after school. The bakery was just a bike ride from her home. Going through the death of a family member was never easy, much more if it's someone who gave birth to you. Still, Nicole stayed strong and grew even stronger. She continued with her everyday life. Not long after that, her father and grandmother were impressed by how well she handled it. She still gets sad at times, but she brushes it off by going to the bakery to work. Nicole grew to love her job as she had found a new purpose there. She rides her bike to get to and from work and home. These were dark times, but she still managed to carry on. Though Nicole was already back up to her feet, the feeling of loss still lingers. It is a good thing that she has a good set of friends that she grew up with and with whom she can confide to. As if a part of her coping mechanism, Nicole was rarely found at home. Either she was at work or at school, or she was with any of her friends. Since their parents were always away, Nicole and Andy were pretty much allowed to do almost everything they wanted. Their grandmother was not that strict but should still be informed of their whereabouts as to avoid worrying her. When the cat is away, mice will play. And since Ad is not exactly around all the time, Nicole and Andy are free to do anything they wanted. They started to live with their grandmother exclusively, and she's not that strict on them either. Even so, neither of them strayed away nor neglected their lives. Making the choice to stay with their mother just made more sense since Ad and Jolanda were gone for quite some time. Despite not being strict, their grandmother was still able to guide them and provide them with stable upbringing. At first, everything was going well. After all that has happened to them, they managed to move on with their lives. Nicole was still young, but the unfortunate events she had to go through were no small thing. Nicole and Andy ended up living with their grandmother, and they were both happy to make the choice. Their father and his wife were never around, anyway. Though standing as the children's main guardian, the grandmother wasn't strict in the least bit, but provided them with stable upbringing nonetheless. Nicole didn't have many things, but she knew she had to be contented with what she has. She may be happy to stay with her grandmother, but there are still times when she wishes she was at home with Ad. Nicole's daily routine revolves around going to school in the morning and proceeding to work in the afternoon. One particular day among her program, she just got out of school and went home to her grandmother's house to prepare for work as usual. A few minutes and she went on to say goodbye to her grandmother before leaving. Nicole took her purse and keys and hopped on her bike to head to the bakery. There was never a day that she was late for work. However, this day was far from ordinary. 15 minutes has passed and she was still not where she was supposed to be. The owner of the bakery, who was also Nicole's employer, is starting to get worried. He did not have contact details for Nicole's guardians, so he went ahead and called the police to pronounce the situation. He is starting to get real worried that he needed someone to come out to the city and try to look for Nicole. Minutes later, a team of police raked the area to look for the 15-year-old girl. They soon found Nicole's grandmother's house and was able to inform her of what happened. The grandmother hurriedly called Ad to let him know of the situation. Nicole was known to be punctual, so the store owner immediately knew that something was wrong when she didn't show up that day. He even went out to look if he could see any hints of Nicole coming. When he saw nothing, he tried calling her house. Since there was no one at Ad's home, he was left with no choice. The store owner called the police. As soon as the police came, they started asking passersby around the area to ask if anyone has seen a girl resembling Nicole. Much to their disappointment, no one seemed to see anyone or anything. The police continued searching for Nicole in the area. 30 minutes into the hunt, they finally saw something. Abandoned and along the banks of Damel River was Nicole's bike. With such an essential clue, a search team immediately started looking for Nicole in the waters. For hours and hours they looked for Nicole. Unfortunately, her body was nowhere to be found. In judgment to their fruitless search, the police concluded that she was not in the river. Amidst the dark and cloudy waters of the river, they were sure to explore every inch for her body, but to no avail. As soon as the bad news reached him, Ad rushed towards home and back to his family. It was beyond his imagination how Nicole was missing. He knew that she was not one to run away, but that only led him to fear the worst. Until one morning he received a call from the police. They announced that they haven't found Nicole yet, but they have found a canvas bag. It was found out that the exact same bag was in Nicole's possession on that day when she left for work. Finding the canvas bag next to a canal, the police planned to search within the area the next day. Ad was not coping up well with the situation. He cannot sleep, and even when he is awake, his thoughts torment him all the more. 2 weeks have already passed since Nicole disappeared, and there were still no new leads regarding her whereabouts. They just wanted to see their girl again. She was still young, and she just lost her mother. Sadly, there is no assurance that their wish would be granted. The call they received from the police stating that they have found Nicole's bag gave them a tiny ray of hope. Ad at least felt that somehow, the investigation was gaining progress. Finding Nicole's bike and then her bag may seem like big clues, but they still cannot get a hold of her body. Nonetheless, the police still used those as leads of where to look for Nicole. They started searching for her around the area where they found the bag. Ad was also asked to come to the police headquarters. They asked Ad if Nicole had any tendencies to run away from home. A thought struck the authorities that she may have reached out to other family members in Germany. As a father who is well acquainted with her daughter, Ed knew that it's impossible. The investigation has never stopped. The police continued with their search. They also started accepting tips and even put out a monetary award in exchange for a tip what would lead to Nicole's whereabouts. For many times, Ad and Nicole's grandmother have been interviewed repeatedly. At the end of the day, all of them were still left with nothing despite of the number of leads that has come their way. As days and weeks passed by, Ad was getting more and more upset. He started thinking that the police were not giving it their all as they have not found Nicole yet. The search had gone on but to no avail. Every single person who was ever involved with Nicole has already given their statements through police interrogations, her boyfriend, friends, and even some strangers. The police were evidently doing all they could just to get Nicole home safe and sound. To see if there is more to what they let on, Ad and Nicole's grandmother have been interviewed for many times. Everything they have gathered was recorded and written down in full detail. Despite of the number of man-hours spent on searching for the teen, they still got nothing. Nicole was yet to be found, and Ad's temperament is getting worse by the day. His wife Jolanda stayed by his side through these tough times. She helped the family through it all, and hired a known psychic to see if they can get more clues that may have been overlooked. No one among them would have thought of that. Out of utter desperation, they met with the psychic. She advised them to fixate their search on 2 specific canals in the river due to a flittering feeling that Nicole's body was going to be found there. Trusting her intuition alone, they proceeded to follow her word. They heeded the psychic's advice seriously. Right after that, Ed told the police what they were just advised to do. The police knew that though there isn't any guarantee that anything will come out of it, they also had nothing to lose. So they decided to search the area with the help of K9 dogs. There was so much hope for this hunt, but still nothing came up. The dogs were not able to find a single hit, and now they're back to the beginning again. Losing all hope after gaining nothing from the searches, the police think that the lost teen was nowhere to be found anymore. Days and weeks had passed, until it's already 2 months of Nicole's sudden disappearance. Finally, their search for her body has come to an end. Somewhere near the Van den Hurk house, a random hiker was exploring the woods when something odd caught his eye. It was quite far, so he came closer to take a look. Closing the distance between him and the object, what he saw shocked him. It was a dead body. He immediately called the police, and just within minutes they were on the scene. A series of forensic and DNA confirmed that it was indeed Nicole's body. Nicole has been gone for months, and that long of a time is not good whether she is already dead or still alive. That amount of time led her to a very unfortunate end. Still, they do not have a concrete conclusion to her cause of death. There was, however, a speculation that she was stabbed by a knife. Her family was speechless to the shock of what they heard. All those times they held on to the hope that they would still find her alive, even after days of nothingness. It was a huge punch to the guts, finding out that she has been murdered cold-heartedly. Where there's a dead body in a murder scene, there's a murderer. Nicole's rotting body is now more difficult to search for clues. Some sort of DNA evidence or any clue is important. The police hope that they could find anything that would lead them to the suspect. After a couple of days, they finally handed her body to her family. Without delay, Ad arranged to have Nicole's funeral that weekend. Though they searched her body, the police found no leads. They still wanted to dig more into it as they interviewed Ad and his mother again, not yet satisfied from finding nothing in Nicole's body. Losing Nicole was one thing, finding out that she was murdered heartlessly was another. Alongside the Van den Hurks, thousands of people came to express their condolences. The Dutch community gathered as they paid their respects to this poor young girl who was gone too soon. Nicole was just a girl. Despite her life's misery, she had friends and a family who love her dearly. On top of that, she still has a bright future ahead of her. But that was all gone because of an inhumane deed done to her. As if that was not unfortunate enough, the police was not able to obtain any further leads even after finding Nicole's body. Determined, they still did not give up on the case, that they even set their sights on Nicole's family. After getting nothing from their searches, the police shifted their attention into looking at Andy, and even Nicole's grandmother. Her stepbrother Andy, who was 5 years older than her, has never been part of the investigation until now. Andy has moved back home with his father since Nicole's disappearance. Everyone was taken by surprise when and Andy were arrested 6 months after Nicole's funeral. Apparently, they were found to be possible suspects in Nicole's case. They were kept in the interview room for hours, but the police had no sufficient evidence to keep them in custody, so they were let go right away. Lack of evidence eventually led to and Andy's freedom, so they just headed back to their home. For months on end, the authorities never ceased in working on the murder case until they had nothing left to work with anymore. The case is almost going cold until something came up. Recently, a family friend was arrested for drug trafficking, claiming that she knew things about Nicole's case. She started mentioning names of people she worked for, and claimed that they were involved in Nicole's disappearance and murder. However, they suspected that she was just trying to strike a shortened prison time deal with law enforcers. Waiting for something to come up, was having the longest hours of his life. They have found Nicole's body, but justice for what she had gone through was yet to be served. Though it was never declared as a cold case, their investigative efforts scaled back immensely. Surprisingly, they obtained a new lead that was too hard for to hear. They had a family friend who was arrested for drug trafficking. She claims that she knew something about Nicole's case, pinpointing people she worked with as people involved in abducting and murdering Nicole. But then it was a false lead which just struck their hopes up, only to find that it was a dead end after all. The confession might have been the answer they were looking for, except that it was a false lead from a criminal trying to reduce her sentence. There was nowhere left for the investigators to turn to after that last straw of a false confession. Tips had stopped coming in and they had no new suspects. But still, the police reached out to the Van den Hurks and assured them that they weren't closing the case. However, there are some changes that needed to be done. Only one detective will be left assigned to the case, considering the period it already consumed. It has been so long since Nicole disappeared, and before they knew it, 15 years had already passed. After years and years of finding nothing, Ed already feels defeated. It was 15 years already. Nicole would have been in her 30s already, but the murderer who cut her life short is still unidentified. Ed did not stop hoping and begging the police not to stop putting in efforts until they found the killer. There was nothing left for him to do now but to wait. All those years he had already done everything that he could, pray for someone who has seen something to call and make progress with the investigation again. Nicole's disappearance and murder trapped the Van den Hurks in a rut for a long time already, but as hard as it is, life must go on. The year is 2011 when they started picking themselves back up. Ed pursued his career and continued working in the music industry, but still lived in the Netherlands. On the other hand, Andy moved to England for a fresh start. Despite the distance, and Andy kept close contact and talked to each other regularly. Soon enough, resigned himself to the fact that he just had to let it go at some point. Andy thinks different, for he couldn't let go of the fact that the murderer is still on the loose. He decided to act on it. After being stuck for a long time, Andy became suffocated with the Dutch life as it has become stifling. He needed to go somewhere else to clear his mind, so he went and surrounded himself with something new. But still, he cannot seem to move on from Nicole's death. He felt that no murderer was going to be found if he will not do something about it. Ed remained mournful as months and years passed. His daughter's case is still not yet resolved, and with the way the things were going, he is not satisfied. They weren't just going to waste time waiting if there is anything else that they could do. Ad remained mournful as months and years passed. His daughter's case is still not yet resolved, and with the way the things were going, he is not satisfied. They weren't just going to waste time waiting if there is anything else that they could do. Much to everyone's surprise, a Facebook post revealing the culprit popped up. It was Andy. He posted in his social media, telling his family and friends that it was him who killed Nicole. Right after the public feat, Andy walked straight into the nearest British police to turn himself in. He faced the authorities as he repeated his confession. Andy was arrested immediately and was extradited back to the Netherlands to stand trial for the case. He was kept in jail when he got back in the Netherlands, and did not talk to anyone else, not even with his father. Andy's confession added a new record to the case. He was kept in jail, but his captivation only lasted for a week. The police tried to sort things out during his time in jail. Not long enough, they knew that they cannot keep Andy in their custody any longer, for they were not able to find any concrete evidence to hold him down. Andy's social media post was something, but that's not enough proof in court. Smelling something fishy, the police interviewed Ad about his son's confession. His only answer was maybe Andy was just trying to be in the spotlight after shining on Nicole for too long. Ad has no way of knowing whether Andy was telling the truth or not. Either way, he did not like what Andy was doing. He had just moved to Spain recently after having divorced Yolanda. He needed a break, so he distanced himself away from all the media attention growing in his hometown. At this point, Yolanda was brought into the investigation as well. She was also interviewed, but she has nothing to say except that she thinks there was an ulterior motive behind Andy's actions. She cannot seem to fathom exactly what it is, but knowing Andy, she could tell that he would never do such a thing. For years, all the attention was on Nicole. When she started missing, looking for her, and even when she was found, there was still the investigation for her murderer. Andy was kept in jail due to his confession, but was let out in just a matter of days due to lack of evidence. However, when Ad was interviewed about it, he had something different in mind. He thought that Andy was only doing it so that, for once, he could be the one under the spotlight and instead of her stepsister. Little does Ad know, there is more to what Andy has done. Just moments after Andy's release, he took the world by surprise one more time. If in his first confession he claimed that he was the one who killed Nicole, his next declaration says otherwise. Andy announced that he did not kill Nicole, and that he confessed as a criminal to bring the case back to the limelight. This time he asserted that his father Ad was the real culprit. He said that Ad raped Nicole, and that she became pregnant with his child. Ad killed her so that no one would know about it. Once again, the public was shocked by such revelations. Ad was dumbfounded as to what Andy was really up to. Andy was desperate. He wanted the police to start investigating Ad again. On the other hand, Ad denied everything right after hearing the sensational news. He was firm that there is no way that he could ever do that to Nicole, his daughter that he even fought custody of. Ad was rendered speechless that Andy could go as far as to betray him like that. Later on, Andy disclosed to the media that he was doing all of these hoping that the confessions would lead to have Nicole's body exhumed. He believes that the police must see once again if they could extract any trace of foreign DNA from her body that might have been overlooked before. Now that the police were forced into a corner, it was revealed that all those years waiting for nothing were for naught. They came to realize that they didn't even perform proper investigations in the first place. Nicole's body has to be unearthed to see if Andy was telling the truth. If they did find a DNA strain, it was best to hope that it would be enough to at least find a suspect. There is no time to waste. The police then discharged a team to take Nicole's body to the Netherlands Forensic Institute. This time they are determined to go on until there are absolutely no stones left unturned. In September 2011, Nicole van den Hurk's body was dug up from the ground for re-examination. It took several days, for they wanted to do it right and search her thoroughly this time. So the waiting game starts, for that is all that they could do, to wait. Ad was confident that his DNA would not be found on her body, but hoped they would discover something nonetheless. Ever since Andy's wild accusation, Ad had not spoken to him. He still felt betrayed by his own son, and whatever his reason may be, Ad was not sure if he could ever move on from it. At last, the long wait is over. The results of the DNA testing came in. Sure enough, there was no trace of Ad, but there is indeed a foreign DNA found on Nicole's body, and it definitely belonged to a man. The police went public with the results at hand and immediately received new leads from the people. In addition to the reward money offered before, they even increased it now just to find the murderer faster. What was deemed to be a stale cold case is now alive and burning again because of those. They already have a lead, and that's more than just a start. The long wait has put everyone at the edge of their seats. The second Ad heard the news, his heart skipped a beat. This could be the moment he has been waiting for almost 2 decades now. He might finally get the answers that he had been looking for over 15 years. They feel closer than ever to finding the culprit behind the unspeakable crime. Finally, they got a break in the case. The foreign DNA found on Nicole's body matched with someone, and he was already in their criminal database. Andy's efforts, though scandalous, were not in vain after all. The foreign DNA of a man that was found on Nicole's dead body match with a man named Jaws DG, a former psychiatric patient and convicted rapist. Aside from finding his DNA on Nicole's body, they still need to find the reason why. Nonetheless, the 46-year-old man already has a record of being arrested as a criminal for raping 3 different women on 3 isolated cases. They interviewed Joss, and he revealed that he had left his house the exact same day that Nicole disappeared. He recalled having a heated argument with his girlfriend before going out to take a walk. Joss DG was already penalized for his past crimes. For one of the convictions he faced, he was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment and was ordered to get treatment due to his past. His interrogation disclosed the fact that on the same day that Nicole had disappeared, he had left his house too. That day, he had a heated argument with his girlfriend and decided that he needed some time away to clear his head, so he went outside and took a walk. These findings led to have him tried in court, wherein his trial was scheduled to begin in the winter of 2015. It was a big step to have found Jaws' DNA on Nicole's body, but apparently there was more to it. His lawyer put forth the fact that there were more DNA strains than one found on Nicole's body, which it was not Jaws alone. He also stated that the other traces found on the body came from Andy and Nicole's boyfriend. To his defense, Jaws' lawyer claimed that Joss and Nicole had known each other, and there was consensual sex going on between the two before Nicole's death. But then, the prosecution countered the defense's argument. They counterclaimed that Nicole was at the wrong place at the wrong time and encountered Joss, who was still boiling from a fight. The defense is not the only side prepared for the trial. The prosecution also had their own claims as to what really happened. They insisted that Nicole did not know Joss. Nicole and Joss only crossed paths that fateful day, in which Joss was already clouded with his rage. It was most likely that Joss took out his anger on the innocent girl. In just a moment, Nicole's life was taken from her, and she was not at fault at all. On the other hand, Jaws' lawyer stuck to his argument by assertively trying to discredit the DNA findings from Nicole's body. Due to their persistent claims, the defense asked the court to have the DNA samples be tested again. They pushed the fact that the findings displayed DNA strains from 3 different people, so putting the blame on Joss is unreasonable and wrong. The court accepted the appeal and had the DNA be reanalyzed. It took weeks for the testing to come back with concrete evidence. When the results were out, a spokesperson for the Health Institute came to announce the results. It was demonstrated that it still was 1,000,000 times more likely that the DNA found is from Joss. The prosecution had heard enough. They immediately asked the court have Joss be penalized by serving time in prison for at least 14 years. The fact that Nicole would ever have a casual relationship with a man who is more than 3 times her age is unimaginable to them. However, the trial closed with an unwarranted decision. Joe's charges dropped from murder to manslaughter and rape. The trial ended in November 2016, and the verdict was disclosed. As anxious as everyone who had been waiting has been, the sentencing was not anyone would have expected to hear. The trial lasted for almost 2 years and now, the verdict is out. Much to everyone's disappointment, Joss was not found guilty of the manslaughter charge, though he was found guilty of rape. In the end, he was just given a 5-year imprisonment sentence. It was a much lesser charge than what everyone believed he deserved, but the judge was left with not much of a choice. The judge had to give a more lenient sentence, for he was decisive that Joss was legally insane at the time the crime was committed. It made the public unhappy. They believed Joss deserved a much heavier sentence. But then, they can't do anything with the path that justice had taken. Even after being accused of murder, Joss only got a much shorter prison time than the public expected him to have. The court put much consideration after weighing his mental state and decided to give him that sentence. They believe that he was legally insane when he committed the crime. Unfortunately for the angry public, Joss' case lightened excessively. Aside from that, it cannot be denied that there are still 3 other DNA traces found on Nicole's body. It was enough to cast a shroud of uncertainty. Nonetheless, they still believe that Joss was not penalized enough. Of all the enraged followers of the case, Ad was the most affected one. The news shattered him to pieces. This was not how he had hoped Nicole's justice to be served. The amount of time that he spent waiting for this moment was no joke. 5 years was not enough to justify what was done to his beloved daughter. Andy was so lost he did not know what to believe anymore. Apparently, Andy strongly believed that his father was involved with the murder. He took Joss' 5-year sentence as a bad joke. While there are two sides to every story, the full story of what really happened to Nicole might never be heard of anymore.